You're listening to the Better People podcast. I'm your host, Tom Warner. With me today is our resident expert, Rhonda Ramirez, a licensed
Hello.
professional counselor out of Central Texas. Hello there. Today we were going to be talking about what happens when you're reaching your goals, and then you've and I say goals, it could be working through and processing anxiety and issues like that, and you take a back step.
Right.
How do you recover from that?
Well, I just look at it and I talk to people about it in the same way almost every time. And that is failure, which seems like failure, is not failure if you're learning from it. So, if the only time it's a failure is if we just disregard everything and don't learn anything from it. I think that may really be where we fail. But if you're working toward a goal, maybe you're working towards processing through something, or you have like a very tangible goal that you're consistently working on with someone, and you miss some days, or you get sidetracked and overwhelmed with, I don't know, life. I think that's where we become each other's cheerleaders, and not like the overly excited, not authentic cheerleader, but the cheerleader that says, you know what, just get back up, do it, try again. Because if you've done it this way and it didn't work, now you learn, okay, well, what didn't work? Well, maybe I need to write things down. Or maybe I need to have an accountability partner that just checks on me through text, or maybe it's someone you see every day. You know, maybe there's something else you need to add to your process to be more successful for yourself. I don't think any failure is a reason to completely quit. I just think we just keep going, because it's that thing of when you were learning to walk, you didn't know when you fell, you just got back up, because we're babies and we don't have all of that expectations that we do as adults or even older children. So, you just get back up. And that's the thing, is that nothing is big enough to completely quit. You say, okay, well, that did not work. Let's figure out a different way to do it. Or it was working for a little bit and I got overwhelmed with something else. Well, maybe that was just a situational thing. Or maybe it's like, now how do I continue my focus and still do the things I need to do in life? So I'm not sure that anything is completely a failure.
So would you say a part of that is, would you say that, I don't want to say failure, but maybe pausing and taking back steps? I don't want to say failure, but we're gonna people may think of it as failure. In case in point, I tell people journal every day and wake up early. And for the last 2 weeks, I've rolled right out of bed right before it's time to go to work, and I'm like, I'm not practicing what I preached. But would you say
Right.
there's a degree of expected possible? I don't want to say maybe relapse or something like that. People can start making back tracks. What am I trying to say? Back steps.
Well, I would say nothing is a completely straightforward arrow, completely always moving forward. I think that's almost an unrealistic expectation. It is in the things that don't work where we learn the things that do work. You have to experience all of the things that don't work before well, I know that doesn't work. Let's cross that option off the list. Let's try something else. I won't say nothing anymore. I might say rarely is it a straight shot, but I feel like probably almost nothing is a straight shot.
Right.
It's almost impossible. You have to learn through those missteps through those times where like, oh man, I lost focus. I didn't, I wasn't focusing on what I was supposed to. And now it looks like this. Here's some other things that have happened because I wasn't focusing here. So I don't want those to happen anymore. So let's go back to what I know works. And sometimes that means you go back to the very basics. And you're like, okay, let me restructure everything and go back to knowing exactly the last time I felt like it was working. Let's go back to that and let's see if that still works. And if that does, let's do that for a little bit and then move forward.
Do you think it's common for people to vary up? Like in the case of my point, I get bored sometimes.
Yeah,
I'm like, I've done this for so long that, I need to shake it up a little bit, but I still want to be, disciplined in some areas. Mm-hmm. And I get, I would like to say I'm still young, about to push 40, but
oh yeah, for sure.
We'll go with it. And, I feel like, well, I see the people, the CEOs and the even, the people that we would look up to who's like, oh, every morning I do this, and mm-hmm. It's like clockwork. Every morning I do this. And,
right.
And I'm like, how do you not get bored from that?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe I have ADD. I don't know, possibly. I mean, or something.
I don't know. I get bored too, but I think it's sometimes you have to weigh boredom over effectiveness.
Right.
And then when you realize, okay, well, maybe it's a bigger priority for me to be effective. Okay. Then you also have like a paradigm shift about the value of that act or that discipline. It becomes more valuable because it is effective. And then when you're doing it, you can always make tiny shifts to kind of keep your interest. If you're journaling every day, and then then you have a period where you're like, well, I totally just didn't do what I was supposed to do. Well, then maybe you go back to the journaling, but have like maybe kind of a topic starter instead of, if you were just processing through things, there may be some things where you can just change it a tiny bit and it becomes a little more interesting for a little bit. And then, you might have to change it again.
That's fair. I could see that. In my case, I think it's important to still do so.
Right.
I have a format I use, but I've noticed, like with me, when you start shifting into another mindset, and you forget what was working, and then you let yourself lose. And you're like, you know what? Thinking back, I was happier when I did that, and I was happier when I exercised or whatever it may be. What is it that made me stop? And I guess you have to reflect on even on yourself, on what factors contributed to you ending the successful, what's the word I'm looking for? The successful routine you were building.
Right. Well, and it takes a long while to build a routine, and one that you stick with, and you have to alter it little by little to figure out exactly where the sweet spot is for you. I don't know that I have very much that's super routine in my own life. But you can do a similar routine and just alter it one step here,
it's seasonal. I think it's seasonal. I mean, you're also an educator, and so right now, I don't want to say you're in downtime because you're probably always getting ready for something. But you're kind of you can be in seasons. I had a person tell me that, because I was saying, how do you have time to volunteer and do this? And they said, I don't always have time to volunteer and do things. In fact, she said, I sometimes go through what I call a season of no. And that's where people will say, hey, can you help with this? No, not right now. I can't do that right now. Maybe talk to me in 6 weeks, or talk to me in a month, and then maybe I can.
Right.
And so I really like that, because it's okay to say no, and it's okay to set those boundaries and to say, I need to focus on myself right now. And I think whenever you have things that come up that keep you from from fulfilling what brings joy and happiness each day, that maybe you need to reevaluate what it is you're doing.
Right. And that also is based on, priorities, which are also seasonal, which are also, movable. Your priorities may not be the same in 6 weeks. Your priorities may not be the same in 6 months. And maybe some people have similar priorities for a long period of time. But when they alter or change, I was just talking to someone who was much younger than me, and I said, right now your priority is education, but in 10 years your priority may be, family. And those two things look different, and they also end up with a different product. Because if your priority right now is education, of course the product will be, some sort of education. It may not be a complete one, but some sort. If your priority in 10 years is your family, that education will no longer be the first priority. And it moves, and they're interchangeable.
Yeah, I can say that. I can say that as a younger Thomas, before we had kids, I didn't have an issue working 12, 13 hours a day, because,
Right.
what else am I going to do with my time? Now, I'm not going to say that was healthy,
No,
but it
not
was,
necessarily.
but I had no other commitments other than come home
Mm-hmm.
and feed the cats and
Right.
go to sleep and just be sure to wake up on time to be at work.
Right.
And for me, that was my routine for a good 6 or 7 years.
Well, and sometimes that's the difference between keeping your discipline and not. Maybe your priorities have shifted a bit, and that's why it may be difficult to keep something the same, and that's where you alter it just one little click or not. I was going to say, for those of us who've gotten our eyes checked, the optometrist, says this one or this one. And it's a minuscule amount of difference, but it's noticeable. And the same thing is if you're trying to stay disciplined on something and you've kind of let it go a little bit, maybe you have to look back and say, okay, how can I change it by this one tiny click that will make it more in focus for me to keep that discipline or to keep that pattern in my life? And it's just trial and error. And if you do trial and error, you're gonna mess up sometime.
Oh, that's fair. And we're talking about messing up and continuing. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's a good tie-in to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So honestly, that is really the end of our discussion. In that case, at least on this part of it, I know we're going to be talking about, over time, talking about
Yeah.
processing stress and then coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms,
Mm-hmm.
in future episodes. So, well, I appreciate you being on the show. All right. Well, thank you for
Sounds
joining
good.
us today. Yes, thank
Mm-hmm.
you. You're listening to the Better People Podcast. Join us next Tuesday for another episode.